Very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for dialing in for today's webinar, I should say. Hi, my name's Nick Lane. I'm the Deputy CEO of the AAA. I'll be just providing a brief introduction for today's speaker. In the first instance, please, for any technical assistance, please do phone Redback support on 1800-733-416. And if you would like to listen to the webinar rather than through your computer but through your phone, instead you can dial the number and passcode that's listed in the chat box. Today's webinar is Regional Airport Business Development and will be presented by Kelly Ward. Kelly is a senior consultant for Airbiz based in Queensland. Kelly's contribution to Airbiz Aviation Businesses team is primarily in the fields of route development and forecasting passenger movements. Kelly is an educator and regular speaker on aeronautical business development with a significant interest in regional airports. She enjoys combining aviation and investment, advising on airport transactions and supporting airports in developing relationships with airport partners. She began a career in market research and moved into aviation as a research manager for a regional airport group in 2005 before joining Airbiz in 2012. So again, today's topic is regional airport business development. This is the third webinar in a series of webinars that we're presenting to our members. Kelly's presentation will again cover an introduction to aeronautical business development and and discuss a scenario, being a 15-minute pitch to an airport that an airport might give to an airline network planner. Also, regional airports can benefit from establishing and improving their relationships with their airline partners at a strategic level. The scenario is salient with the Roots Asia conference scheduled for Brisbane next March, I should say, affording regional airports an opportunity to experience airport airline speed dating at a minimal cost without the barrier of overseas travel. The webinar will include a case study on introductory airport presentation prepared on behalf of a regional airport in New Zealand as well. To ask Carly any questions, please use the chat box, which is on the left-hand side of your screen, just to the right of the cogwheel. After you type out a question, hit enter to submit. Questions will be answered throughout the seminar. All webinars that we present for our members will be made available via our YouTube channel. So if you look up airportsassociation.asn.au on YouTube, you'll be able to find a copy of this webinar and the other two that we've already held there. And finally, before I do hand over, I will take this opportunity to thank both Kelly and Airbiz Aviation Strategies for their continued support, and also in particular for Kelly's time today in presenting for you. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kelly.
Thanks very much, Nick. That's really good of you, and thanks to the AAA for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all today. It's great to have a platform to share my passion, which is regional airport business development. I just love the wonderful world of regional. I think you guys are awesome in the regional area. You know, you could be out there like the other webinar topics said. You could be doing pavement design. You could be doing active wildlife management, and here you are doing business development. I think the smartest people work in regional because you have to be a master of all trades. So before we start today, I thought we'd do a little poll to understand where everybody's at and how you're actively engaging in research at this point in time and in working. So let me know how you're going, everybody. Do you meet with network planners regularly? Is it something you'd like to do, or is it something you kind of think, well, I'd like to, but I'm not sure how? Because there's great opportunities out there. Let's see, what have we got? We've got about half and half of people saying they already regularly meet with network planners. Congratulations, that's great. And a group of people who'd also like to. Oh, that's pushed up, that's gone to the majority. So we've got a couple of polls as we go through the process, and it's good to see that you're all keen to get involved. I think you might notice this. This is the standard image of what people have for the business development, which is the fire saluting a new aircraft. In this case, it was Air North arriving at Townsville from Darwin. And look, that's the pinnacle. That's certainly what we're all aiming for. That is the holy grail. But it's not necessarily what route development is all about. It's much more organic than that. So let's get into the topic and understand what we're going to do today. I think when you understand the why and how of what you're doing, the actual execution, the what is really straightforward. So we're going to spend some time talking about why you might want to do it, what's in it for me and what's in it for the airline. If you've got that justification clear, then you know what you want to do. And then we'll look at some theory, and then we'll look at how. So there's a couple of scenarios. One is, as Nick said, the Routes Asia opportunity that's coming up in Brisbane in March next year, which I'm pretty passionate about, but it will probably only be inappropriate for a small niche of you. And the other is really just ongoing existing airline partner relationship management, which everybody should be doing in an ideal world. And then we'll look at that case study, as Nick says, and we'll do any Q&A as we go or at the end, depending on how you'd like to cover it. So why would you want to do this at all? Well, let's have a look at that justification first. Essentially, we want to talk about establishing you as the go-to person for your region. You're going to lead aviation. You're going to have all your stakeholders lined up behind you, and you're going to get a seat at the table to make some influence. So this is about buying yourself that seat at the table and positioning yourself as the go-to person from an airline's perspective for your destination. Do you think of yourself as a thinker, as a strategist? You'd be surprised if you actually really think about it. You're in your destination all the time. You see your counsellors, your community. You actually have an awful lot of insight that's really valuable to airlines. You're perfectly positioned to lead aviation for your region. So you've got a valuable commodity to trade, which is your knowledge. And today is all about positioning you as an individual, as your knowledge guru, to lead aviation for your region, to add some insight and skills and to get yourself a seat at the table. So let's answer that question of why, who, where, when and how. What is the justification? Well, why? Why not, in fact? You want to engage in growing your business. You want to be actively involved. So what is it? Well, this is aeronautical business development. So what we're really looking at here is engaging with corporate level airline partners at a strategic level rather than operational and day-to-day, and positioning yourself to be the go-to person for the region. Now, how might you do that? Well, really it's about inspiring confidence in your airlines, to presenting information in an insightful manner and engaging in an ongoing conversation with them as we retrain, maintain and grow seat capacity and ultimately get to that holy grail potentially of a new route. So who should be doing this? Well, you're here today and that's great because that means you're invested. I suggest you think of today as a skill and a training opportunity. You're enhancing your brand, you're gaining new skills. It's all about your personal development. Where and when might you do it? Well, you can do it anytime. In fact, I suggest you start now. But if you need an impetus, then there is this Routes Asia conference coming up in Brisbane in March. So we'll talk some more about that later. And if you haven't heard about it, we'll get some more insight. So let's think about the what's in it for me. What's in it for me as an airport manager, and what's in it for the airline? Well, the purpose for you really is all about influence. I hear regional airport managers, I meet them, and I sometimes hear that they're frustrated, that they kind of know all the answers, but nobody necessarily asks them for them. So this is about you gaining influence, you basically being the interface between all those local stakeholders in the council, in tourism, in economic development, the on-airport businesses and the community, through to the airlines, with you in the middle as the interface. So you'll hear me talking about you a lot in this. You're the person who understands airline speak. There are multilateral relationships. There are roles for councillors and for mayors, but there are also significant roles for airport management in that interface with the airline. So let's look at the airline. You know, airlines are very complex beasts. Their organisational structures are amazing. This is the Virgin Blue organisational structure. There are 46 departments in there. There are 7 executives who report to 1 CEO, and there are 9 teams. That's probably, you probably can't even read it. It's so detailed. So we're not talking about the whole airline here. There are plenty of roles for other people in the council to play. We're talking about the commercial team, the people in network planning, strategy, revenue management. We're talking at that level today. So what's in it for the airline? Why would they even want to listen to you? Well, actually, there's an awful lot of value in it. You know, they're looking at their network from the top down, and you're looking at the route from the bottom up, and you have different perspectives. And, you know, they might be managing lots and lots of different routes. You could be as little as, say, 0.5% of their domestic network, but they're interested. They want to know. So there's a vicious circle that says there's declining yield or declining load on a route. If they don't know any more than that, they lose confidence and they cut seats, and that means you cut packs, and that goes on and on and on. And then there's the opposite side of the equation. There's the virtuous circle where you start to build a relationship with them, you earn credibility, and they start to listen to you. You educate them with your insights. In fact, what happens is they increase in confidence and they grow seats because they have that insight that they could never hope to achieve sitting in an office in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane. So that's the good news story. That's what we're looking at here, is retaining, maintaining and growing seats. So what about the theory of business development? Now we've established why, let's talk about what you might want to do. Well, there's a basic model of business development, and there it is. And at the bottom of the pyramid are relationships and pricing, and in the middle is your existing capacity. And that's that old adage, a bird in the hand. It's far easier to support existing capacity than it is to get to the holy grail at the top and develop new routes. So I believe the fundamentals are the relationship and the pricing, and that the new route is the icing on the cake. It's great and it's fantastic. The day that you have that experience and the fireys come and salute a new aircraft, that is sensational. It's the best feeling in the world and you can't beat it. But that is a very long game, and there's an awful lot of footwork to put in before you get to that stage. So you can invest in the best business case in the world, but if you don't have those basic fundamentals of a good relationship and the right price, your business case will never get heard. But that's not to say that your business case isn't crucial. It's absolutely crucial. It's just about finding the balance between all those areas. So you've probably heard me say these words a couple of times. The guiding principles are that you build the relationship over the time, that you retain your existing capacity, that you maintain it, and then you build that relationship and you grow it. So it may be, you know, the whole opportunity of going to talk to these guys in the corporate team is to learn from them and to understand how they perceive your destination and your market. If there's an issue, you want to know about it so that you can retain your existing capacity. There may be no issue. You may be able to go on from the traffic light red to the orange of maintaining your capacity and supporting and developing that relationship. And then as they build confidence in your market, you can grow. So let's take another poll. Let's see how we're going. Who's still with us? How many direct routes do you have from your airport? 1, 2, 3? More. We've got people who have more. So it's coming out on balance that we've got 1 or 2. And that's typical of regional airports. You know, we're operating in a hub and spoke mentality here. So let's look at how you view the world versus how the airlines view the world, because when we can understand how we see views differently, we can understand how to present information to airlines. So you have to earn your stripes here like Tony the Tiger. You've got to go out and grow that relationship and understand your view of the world. I've managed to work Jane Austen into an aviation presentation. I'm actually really proud of myself here. Jane Austen probably never envisaged that she'd appear in an aviation presentation 200 years ago. But it is a truth universally acknowledged that airports like dots on the map and that airlines like frequency. I don't think that's exactly what Jane said. I've just paraphrased her a little bit. I've used Brisbane Airport as the example of dots on the map. You can see they've got lots of dots on the map because they're a bit of a hub. They're a hub to the Pacific and they're a hub to Asia, and they have connectivity to North America. And we're really concentrating on the domestic market. So you can see they have lots of central and east coast hubs there, opportunities. And then you look at Qantas and you look at all those lines and you think, you know what, the Qantas and Jetstar network, they operate 156 individual routes in Australia and New Zealand without any double counting. So when you think that they see the world from the top down and you see it to maybe 1 or 2 destinations, you start to understand how you can be valuable to them. So airlines operate hub and spoke models, and they like to build frequency. So they're not necessarily interested in gaining dots on the map. They're interested in gaining yield on routes that they have a history on. And that's why we work on retaining existing capacity first, because you build your credentials and then you establish the case and you learn and you understand more about what it is they want to know from you. And you keep building confidence in the stats that you have, and you keep understanding their processes, and you sum it all up. And you come to a point where you understand that there is valuable commodity that you have, which is the information and insight. So to go back to Jane Austen, it's a truth universally acknowledged. What she actually said was, a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And how that really works for us is that we have an airline. They're in possession of a good fortune. It's a mobile asset. It's an aircraft. And we're in possession of an airfield and infrastructure, but ours is a fixed asset. So how do we win their love? How do we increase our services? How do we bring the two together? Well, one doesn't work without the other. They need each other. It's actually a symbiotic relationship. You'll have seen birds and cows who need each other. Well, airlines and airports are the same. So they don't hold all the cards here, and neither do you. This is a dating game. We need to understand how to work together and how to date. So let's look at our 2 scenarios. We're looking at existing airline partners. That's one way that you would engage in business development. And we're looking at new business, something like going to routes where you're going to meet an airline for the first time. So reality is, whichever way you go about it, it's actually the same role that you're playing. It's about establishing you as the knowledge guru. I saw a lovely quote the other day from Kofi Annan, and he said, knowledge is power, information is liberating, and education is the premise of progress in every society and in every family. So that's something I always come back to. Knowledge is power and information is liberating. In this case, it's going to allow people to make decisions. So you're going to become the knowledge guru for your region. You would want to use an aviation business development opportunity to educate on the drivers of demand in your market. They might be economic, tourism, population and demographics, or it might be new projects and construction. But you're looking to identify opportunity at the end of the day, and you're also looking to develop a partnership approach, which is that you're aligning everybody who has a role to play here, that you're bringing on board the airport, the airline, the tourism industry, or industry itself if you're in a construction or resource region, the economic development team, the council. All these partners need to be aligned strategically and financially. It is a team approach. You can't do this on your own, and the airline will actually appreciate a team approach. So let's look at our 2 scenarios. For our existing airline partners, they're committed, and you're one of the many markets that they have responsibility for, so you have a fantastic role to play. They ask that you be proactive, though, that you tell them good news and bad, because they need to know that. They need to react and they need to plan. They're planning 6 to 12 months out in schedule variation, and they're obviously planning 5 years out in terms of short-term fleet. So they want to know insights into your market. Even if it is bad news, tell them. If there's going to be local job losses, their opinion is they would rather know and modify their capacity and continue to survive the leaner times so they're there when the market returns, than not know and be surprised. So you might want to take a route around maintaining your existing routes. You might want to do a bit of a health check and look at the loads on your route and the yield, the fleet and frequency that are operating, the timing and scheduling. Is it right for the market? Each carrier's market share and their position in the market, which elements they're serving. Are they serving leisure? Are they serving business? This area is all about details. And then there's the growth opportunity, the insights, where you add value. In fact, this is all about facts And this is more about opinion, where you're starting to tell them how they can use information. So you're looking at opportunities to grow existing routes. You're looking to engage in a conversation with them to understand what their appetite is for new routes. And then we look at new business. New business is all about establishing your credentials and starting with a very different clean sheet of paper. So for a new carrier, it's actually about the basics. If you're going to meet an airline for the first time, they need to know about your market, and that's what they want to know about. They want to know who you are, where you are, what your market is, what the drivers of demand are in your market, what your existing supply is, your route map, and then they want to look at what the opportunities are. Why would they want to be in your market? So if you were writing a new route proposal, airlines tell us that there are basically 4 things they want to know. They want to know how many people want to travel, when they want to travel, the time of day, the day of week. They want to know where they want to travel and why, some qualitative information, what sort of travellers are they, and they want to know how much those passengers are prepared to pay. So those are the 4 basic fundamentals of any route proposal that you might want to put forward. And if you stick to those adages, that will stand you in great stead. Now, I've talked about Routes Asia a couple of times. If you don't know about Routes Asia, here's a highline summary of what it's all about. It is a conference that takes place every year around about March or April, somewhere in Asia, where a whole load of airlines and a whole load of airports come together and they do speed dating. So the airport sits at the table and they meet the airlines. And it's a really powerful, quick and easy opportunity to get your feet wet in business development. I was speaking to Peter Pallett of Sunshine Coast Airport about the time that he went to Routes Asia when it was in Adelaide. The last time it was in Australia. It was back in about 2009 or 2010. And he met, as Sunshine Coast Airport General Manager, he met Air New Zealand there for the first time. And that was the beginning of his relationship with Air New Zealand. And in 2012, he launched a direct Auckland seasonal service. So he credits that as the start of the process for him. And I think he also says that it was a very, very valuable opportunity because he met other airlines. He met Singapore Airlines and Emirates and Etihad. And he lobbied them for common rated fares for connections over Sydney. So it wasn't, just about a single route and a single opportunity. It's actually just a great personal development opportunity for you to go and get your feet wet at a relatively low entry price. So here's how it works. Well, you're looking for a date. You're probably looking for a kind of eHarmony date, a long-term commitment. You're probably not looking for a quick flash in the pan with a Tinder-style date. So you sit down at the table with the airline and you tell them your story. And it really is about that story. You're weaving a story. You're enticing them. And you network. You meet other airports. You meet airlines casually round and about, as well as in those dedicated appointments. So it's 2,000 individual meetings that take place over the time period, amazingly. There's 100 airlines, there's 200 airports, there's 30 tourism authorities. And that's Routes Asia in a nutshell. The schedule for the airlines is 2 days of appointments. There's a total of 30 to 40 appointments for each airline. So you can imagine that is absolutely full on. It's very intense on the airport. You get about 8 appointments per individual that you book, but it's incredibly intense on the airlines. Now, they value it because they get the opportunity to gather an awful lot of information really quickly. So that's really good for them to be able to get it in a nutshell, very quickly get some information. They can then maybe identify the airline of their dreams. So how are you going to stand out from the crowd? Well, let's just take a quick poll. Let's see who's actually planning on going to Routes or would be interested in the idea of going to Routes. Let's see if we can prompt you and work out whether you'd like to take part. No, that's not coming up. Don't worry. Oh, here we go. So who's keen to go, who's thinking about it, and who reckons it's probably not for them? Oh, look, that's fantastic. Most people are keen to go. That is absolutely brilliant. I would really recommend it. I think it's just a really great opportunity to go out there and engage with the world. It's low cost, it's low risk. If you don't go again, you've lost nothing, but you've really had the opportunity. It's a bit like going to the conference with the AAA in November. You know, the networking alone is worth it. But you do have to be aware of the dreaded death by PowerPoint, because if you're an airline sitting there receiving 30 to 40 presentations a day, you really need to stand out from the crowd. You're going to receive 30 to 40 different gifts and corporate gifts and make all those handshakes. So you need to plan and prepare. So if you think about it, there is 20 minutes. You know, you've got to go in, you've got to say hello, you've got to make your greeting and introduction. There's then the presentation itself, and there's the closing. And the whole point of this activity is to get a second date, so that they remember you, so that you continue to engage. So the presentation is really important in the middle, but it's kind of like bread to a sandwich. It's not a sandwich without a piece of bread, but the reality is that it's just as important to focus on the introduction and the farewell, the handshaking, the protocol, as it is to focus on the content of the presentation. So what might you want to have in that literal 10 minutes? Because 10 minutes is all you've got. Well, it's got to be really high line, but it's got to tell a story. They want to hear a story. So you need an introduction, you need that story summarized, you need to explain what your market is, and then this is the sandwich here. This is the actual content. That content will be different for every market, but essentially that is what you're doing. It's persuasive writing. You're stating up front what your story is, you're then illustrating it with 3 points, and then you're going for your big pitch. And then you're inviting somebody to engage with you further and sealing the deal. So your goal in all of this is to make a connection, to get that second date, because without it, there's no real point. You need to be engaging in an ongoing conversation. This is just your first opportunity. So I like to say there are actually 3 I's in presenting airport business development. There's information, insight, and influence, or engaging them. Sorry, I'm being a bit generous there. So information is facts, and that's fine. That's great. But it doesn't mean anything on its own. You have to add value with insight. You have to give it some significance or benchmark so that that information means something. And then you've got a transaction. Then you've actually engaged them, and you have the opportunity to influence. You're adding that what's in it for me factor. You're engaging and leveraging and building that relationship over time so that ultimately it makes sense to the airline. They are getting a benefit from it. There is a transaction taking place. So let's look at an example of how that might work when you're informing, adding value through insight in order to engage. Well, information might be that in the census it said your median rent is $180 a week. And quite frankly, the response to that is, so what? It doesn't mean anything. So let's add insight. So we can say, if we benchmark it, that it's $150 cheaper a week than the rest of regional Queensland in this particular council area. All right, well, that's starting to make sense. It's starting to mean something now. All right, well, that's starting to make sense. It's starting to mean something now. And the influence comes in how you use that information. You could actually say, our catchment has a high disposable income, which means they've got money ready to spend on airfares. Hey there, airline, which markets do you think would be viable for our population? And then you've asked a question. You've invited them to participate. You've invited them to engage, or you've inspired them to think about you differently. So that's really what we're getting at here. Now, I've quickly thrown together a few tips for Routes Asia that I'm going to whiz through now. Routes themselves tell you to do 6 things, which is to be concise, to be engaging, to be invested, to be collaborative, which means taking on board the other stakeholders, the tourism, the council, the economic development, to be prepared, in other words, to have done your homework, and for your presentation to be clear, to be simple. And I do like the fact that they say meetings are about presenting, more than presenting information, they're about building relationships. Absolutely, that's fundamental. So my tips having been, I've split them down into two areas. One's practical and the other is about the content. Practical, you'd be amazed at the silly things that you learn when you go to routes, like how hard it is to carry around 15 corporate gifts. Take small gifts, don't take big gifts, because you're going to be dragging bags everywhere with you all day. Making a good first impression, the handshake is important. If it's an Asian airline, make sure you've done your cultural appreciation, you've got your business card protocol right. Maintain focus on the airline. So yes, the presentation is important, but it's actually about the conversation. It's about continual eye contact, connecting with them. Go with a colleague and buddy up. So many hands do make light work, and a good tip is to kick your colleague under the table if you think they're going off track, to get them back on track. That's one of my hot tips. But your eyes really are on the prize, which is landing that second date. And I just found a note of caution about corporate clothing and corporate gifts. You want to stand out from the crowd. So if you would normally wander around wearing an Akubra, go for it. Wear an Akubra. People will remember you. But with the corporate gifts, just make sure that you pick something light and easy for you to travel with. Because remember, the airline is going to be receiving perhaps 30 corporate gifts. And unfortunately, most of them are going to end up in the bin. So pick something unique, maybe some food and beverage from your region, some honey or something that they might want to take home, rather than a ruler with your logo on, because that's probably not going to be making the luggage at the end of the day. Now, when it comes to content, I think planning and preparing are the most important. So this is actually a continual engagement process. It's not a one-shot opportunity. So you want to have the opportunity to continue to talk to them afterwards. So you're asking permission and advice to follow up, to continue to engage with them. You might want to do that by email. You might want to do it with monitoring downloads of material that you prepare. You do need to get their contact details, obviously, to continue that process. As far as content itself is concerned, you might want to mix it up and look at different ways of engaging them. Something visual like a video or some drone footage is really, really compelling and gets people excited. It's really difficult when you're limited, say, as I am, to just a presentation format. It's so much better when you can do something visual. With the information that you present, mix up quantitative and qualitative information, mix facts and anecdotes. Try and engage in a conversation, personalise it and connect. And continue to remember the 3 I's: inform, incite and engage. So it is a two-way conversation. Invite them, ask them questions. Always ask open-ended questions like, does that resonate with any of your other markets? You want to learn. This is an opportunity to learn. So we look at some feedback that airlines gave. And they said, we want airports, tourism authorities, local government and developers to work together. That's about that collaborative partnership approach. We need airports to know we have a small team, so bring information to us. And we want you to be honest with us. And unfortunately, the dollar value is always important. When it comes to marketing, and this is about new routes, irrespective of the type of destination, the question is always more to do with the money. It's always about the money. So those are the sorts of things they're looking to hear. So enough about routes. Let's just quickly talk about the difference between a business case and a presentation. Business case is much more detailed. That initial presentation, as we said earlier, we're looking at a maximum of 15 slides. If this is a new airline to you or a new opportunity or a new contact, you are building awareness. That's the very first step. You're asking the airline permission to continue to participate with you and to move on together to researching. But you're not looking at a big production at this point in time. You're just looking at building awareness. Because business development is a long game and you will get opportunities down the line. The domestic market's been very stable for a long time now, but disruptors have come along and it's gone bust. Virgin has started, Jetstar has started. There have been lots of changes over the years. History teaches that disruptors come along and they shake things up. And it's about you having the opportunity to respond to that, being prepared, having your presentation ready to go and jumping in when those opportunities arise. So to recap, before we go into the case study, here again is that slide about telling your story in 10 minutes. You make an introduction, you state your headline piece, you talk about your market, you demonstrate your 3 points to support your story, and then you go for the big sell. And when you're building your slides and building your presentation, start everyone with a goal in mind. What do I want to get from this slide? What do I want? Is it an understanding or an appreciation of something? And then think of the 3 I's, the inform, the insight, and engage. And the most important thing is to use the information as a conversation starter. So you're going to tell them something, you're going to tell them why it's important, what's in it for them, and then get their opinion, learn and listen and understand how they perceive your market. Because when you know that, you can reinforce the positives and you can debunk the myths. So in a moment, we're going to look at a case study for Taupo Airport. And that's really, I think I want to say thank you very much for Taupo Airport for agreeing to share a piece of work that I did for them. They've never done anything like this before, and they wanted to put together a 15-minute snapshot of their market. Now, I'm not going to present this information to you as they would to their stakeholders. We're just going to look at it visually and identify across 15 slides exactly what it's saying. And you'll see that a major point of this exercise is that it's very visual. The information is light on because essentially it's all about the conversation that's going on with the stakeholder. The visual is just there to support it. The words that appear on the presentation are conversation starters and prompts to the airport's general manager as he talks about his market. But he's the knowledge guru, he's the expert. So we open with an introduction slide. Number 2, we have our content. So we're telling people our story today is going to be an introduction on our airport business and our market. Our market has drivers, these are them, an outbound catchment profile and a destination profile for visitors. And then we'd like to identify an opportunity going forwards because our goal is to build a cooperative relationship with you and grow the airport and the airline to our mutual advantage. So we set out up front what our remit is, and then we talk about the airport business. In this case, I've used a route map, which is always a great way to visually display some information about how Taupo connects to the rest of the world over its hubs. Its vision is to be the best little airport in New Zealand, and good luck to them with that. I think that's a great vision to have. Their facilities, we talk about actual assets, the runway, the apron, the bays, and the busy hour. And we talk about slightly more soft facilities like the car parking and the cafe and the rental booths. And we talk about their market. So it's actually a very heavily general aviation focused airport. We try to add some information at a very high level that then the airport manager can use to engage in conversation. So we move on to talk about the market. The market in Taupo has grown 26% over the past year. We have a couple of graphs to illustrate how that has happened. Essentially, that's happened through fleet upgauging. And we look at some strategies around load factor and capacity. So you can see that capacity has grown here with that aircraft change, but that passenger numbers have also grown. So we use data and then we add value to that data by interpreting it. So the drivers in the Taupo market overall, and we've talked about these 3 key areas. There's the economy, there's tourism, inbound visitors, and then there's demography, there's local outbound travellers. And there's some insight here. 1 in 4 jobs are sourced from retail and tourism. So that tells the airline how important tourism is. We talk about what the indicators for the future are, what the goals that have been set by the region. So they want to increase revenue from tourism, they want to increase jobs from tourism, and they want to continue to have a positive visitor experience. And we look at details around their catchment. In fact, this is a very interesting market where people choose to take maybe semi-retirement and consult, which means they probably travel quite a lot and they probably have higher disposable income. So we can talk very positively around some of the areas to do with the economy and the population. And then looking at the destination, we look at some of the tourism highlights and what some of the strategies are around the event sector to offset seasonality. And we invite them to engage in an opportunity. We say that we're a strong long-term table tourism destination and that we're building by looking at outbound travel, conferencing and events to diversify and to de-risk. So we invite the airline to join us on our team to develop the region as a whole, and then we look to finally secure that second date. So you can see that was very visual as a case study, and that it invited and engaged the audience to start a conversation with Taupo Airport. But it probably took me no more than 5 minutes to run you through that at a very high level. So in summary, let me just see if I can get this slide to work. There we are. We did our case study of Taupo Airport and we understood that they were on a journey, that they had planned a process. So if you were to do this, here's what I'd recommend that you do. That you plan at least a 12-month plan of how you want to go about this, and that you develop that initial piece, that you have that 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 slide presentation ready to go, but that the aim of that is purely to engage a second appointment because you're following up. This is part of a 12-month plan. And that I recommend that you just do it, that you move on, that you start this process, that you engage with your airline stakeholders if you aren't already doing so, or that you make those plans in 6 months' time to go to routes, that you start planning that process now. So I guess the final slide would be sources and support, how you might go about this. Internally, you can develop content from your tourism body and your economic development body. Those are the entities that I worked with on that Taupo case study. You might have internal resources if you're a council airport from marketing and communications who can make a presentation look pretty for you. And externally, you can work with consultants. Consultants have tools that they can use that generally airports don't have, like schedule and traffic analysis tools that can tell you about connecting traffic, or help you benchmark against other ports to give you salient material that you can use to engage the airline in conversation. So as I said, you might want to benchmark, you might want to identify trends with that consultant material, or you might want to be looking for indicators of future health. It might be something within your community that you know there's a new project, there's a new construction project coming along, and that is going to kickstart a whole new level of traffic. Research sources that you might want to look at. You may or may not remember around a year ago we took part in a census as a nation, so there's some new census material out there. I'd again encourage you to go and look at that. It's a really great way to benchmark and to see how we're going. And also from an aviation perspective, the BTRE has a lot of information out there to help you benchmark, which is in the public domain. Your council will have economic information, and the Chamber of Commerce will also have information. From a tourism perspective, you've got your three levels of tourism, your local tourism organisation, and then a state, and then Tourism Australia, which has Tourism Research Australia. So there are different sources there. Now notice we've had a couple of questions, which is awesome. So let's just get into those now. Janet, you said, could you have a copy of the case study? I guess you can, in that it would be available through the download when the, what am I looking for, the YouTube download comes out. So you could actually pause it and look at it on that basis. And again, I'd just really like to thank Taupo Airport for being so generous as to actually share it. Emma, let me read your question. We have an airline coming to visit us later in the year as part of route development undertaking. That's great. They've asked to meet stakeholders. how many organisations would you recommend we have around the table? Okay, I'd recommend you do it in two parts, that you have a one-on-one session with them, and that you then have a stakeholder session. So I would say you would maybe want to have no more than, say, one representative, two representatives from each entity. So tourism, the Economic Development Agency, the Chamber of Commerce. So yeah, just limit the participants' expectations. Maybe a maximum of, say, 6 people in the room, because that's quite a lot for you as the person to stakehold and to moderate. Hopefully that helps. Alan, I will revert to Nick on that question about the YouTube video. I'm not sure. And Janet, I'd just like to iterate, I probably can't kind of send you that copy of Taupo's thing because it's confidential. I mean, it's in the public domain now, but yeah, you'll be able to access it via YouTube.
Sorry, Kelly. Yeah, the YouTube videos generally go up within a few days, so they will be up there. But we'll make sure that usually what happens also post session is an email goes out directly from the Redback guys, which will just also have a copy of the presentation slides, Kelly, if you're comfortable with those.
Yeah, the presentation slides are fine.
Made available. So yeah, so there'll be some information there too. But just keep an eye out if you haven't seen anything. The YouTube page is fairly easy to navigate to when you're in YouTube if you're a regular user of that program.
Yeah, you can always pause it if there's an area that you want to get more information on. Anybody got any other questions? We're doing okay for time. We were at 45 minutes and we're just about on time. Oh, Ben, thanks for that feedback. Ben's just said he feels much better informed about how to go about aeronautical business development. That's fantastic. I mean, I'm very passionate about it, and I just support you getting out there and getting on with it. And as I said, Roots is just a great opportunity. You can go and you can experience something at a very relatively low entry cost. Instead of having to justify overseas travel, just jump in there and have a go. You'll be fascinated at the people that you meet. Thanks, everybody. That's great feedback. Oh, Alan, you've got a question, something, I didn't only got the end of the question, something to serve regional ports. Leakage to major ports. What airlines want to see to serve regional ports? Ah, leakage. Look, here's my favourite topic. I would say leakage is another whole webinar in its own right. The way I feel about leakage is that there are lots of local reasons why it happens, but the answers to it are generally the same, which is about, it's about building, and unfortunately in the short term you have to build sometimes over competing airports to establish a case. So that's probably a separate topic, but I think they want to be told a story. So if you have data, if you have stuff that demonstrates that people from your local community are travelling outbound over other airports, and that data is there and there are ways to get it, then I think it's about building that story and working with the airlines and data like Sabre and OAG to understand how it's happening, to establish a trend and a timeline, and to continue that conversation and ask them what they need in order to make that decision. Bruce, how are you going, Bruce? What have you said? How important is it to work with the airport at the other end of the route proposal? Really good point. There was a slide in there that I skipped through where we were talking about airline feedback, and they do really value that. But it is also limiting in a sense as well, because it does restrict you to only talking about one route in that presentation. So sometimes you want to almost kind of take that conversation offline. If you've got an airline that you're working with all the time that you've maybe got existing business with and it's part of an ongoing conversation, then you would separate out that one, the new route opportunity, and go and talk with that other city pair airport with them on one-on-one. That would be my advice. But it's certainly really good from a financial perspective where you're looking at incentives, because again, the airlines made the point that they're really wanting to hear about the money. Show us the money, unfortunately, is their mantra. So many hands make light work, and if everybody can tip some money into the pot and you're all on the same page from that financial perspective, then that's really valuable. Thanks.
Okay, so thanks very much, Kelly, and I believe we're probably out of time now for questions. So that was a fantastic presentation. Some great questions there from everybody. Kelly, again, very big thank you. If you do have the time, participants, to fill out that survey that's on the screen there on the right-hand side, please, we'd encourage you to provide some feedback there. This feedback just really does help us with our future webinars in terms of how we manage them, and also in terms of the types of topics that you'd like to see similar to today's session by Kelly. So just a final bit of a plug for AAA National Conference. Again, conference this year is in Adelaide. We will have Greg Fordham, Managing Director at Airbiz, speaking at that conference. So thank you again to Greg and the Airbiz team. And also, just in terms of the wider program, it's a very strong program with covering multiple areas, including security, customer service experience, regional and technical content. So please do jump on our conference website, airportsconference.asn.au, to have a look at the program and to register to attend. So a very big thank you again for your time, and please keep an eye out for the next up-and-coming webinar. We will have information on our next webinar in the series in Airport Alert. I believe the next topic is around aerodrome safeguarding, so focusing on airspace protection. This one will be presented by Keith Tonkin, who's Managing Director at Aviation Projects. The date of that webinar, sorry, is the 27th of September, again at 11 a.m. So thank you again, everybody, and thank you, Kelly, a final one, and have a lovely day, everybody.